All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is your favorite dark sorcerer here. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about death, specifically the art of dying. I've done a few videos over the last year on necromancy, upon witchcraft. And most importantly, I've even spoken on what is known at today as thanatology. Okay. But I want to kind of put you into that mind state. I want to put you into that mind state of what is death? Why do you fear death? What is it about death that makes people want to shy away from it? We know the JCI, for an example, the Judo Christian institutions, they fear death. They fear dying, which is why they grasp life so much. But yet, they live in death. You look at all their scriptures. Daniel, his friends being put into a giant boiler, burned alive, but yet came out unscathed. He himself was tossed into a pit full of hungry, ravenous lions and was not touched. You look at all the wars fought, going out into the desert for 40 days, 40 nights, stoning people to death. This is death. You preach life and eternal living, but yet you live in death. You live in death. Okay? In Haitian voodoo, they fear the Bokor because the belief is that the Bokor has the power to take a living, breathing individual and put them in the grave, only to resurrect them as a zombie, a living zombie. You can even go underneath YouTube and you type in zombie mythos or zombie documentaries, things on voodoo, and you're going to come up with numerous different videos just on Bokors. I've spoken on Bokor Leonard a few times over the last few weeks. But even researching voodoo, specifically that of Haitian Voodoo, because it's a path that I've been pursuing along with my necromantic practices over this last year. I found it interesting that so many people talk about voodoo, talk about the Loa, the spirits, which is basically you're living in death, but you're living in life. You had one documentary that I came across where an individual was pronounced in Haiti as the only living zombie. The only living zombie. Because he came back from the dead. How many times did I speak over the last year on necromancy? Be it nigromancy, necromancy, or Nikia, and kind of just show you the difference between conjuration and rejuvenation of a corpse. The spirit, okay? You're living in death, even in religious perspectives, because every occultist lives in death. Every sorcerer or sorceress lives in death. It does not matter if you are a Polero, a witch, a warlock, a sorcerer, a mage, a sage. you live in death. Okay? Because you are seeking spiritual advice. You are seeking the spirits of a wide variety. This means you are dealing with spirits of reincarnation, the reincarnated, as Sorceress Cagliostro, the necromancer, so colorfully put it in the Blood Sorcery Bible, Volume 1. She stated that when a spirit departs from the body, it is a disincarnated soul. This is what you conjure, this is what you tap into to learn from. Satanists, demonologists commune with demons to understand them, to learn from them, to apply what we learn from them into our own lives. But it's not just there. It's not just in spiritualism. So I want to kind of just take you through something real fast. You know, I was sitting here this afternoon. I had just gotten up a little bit ago. Just did not want to wake up today. You know, it was kind of like a dreary, dead kind of day. And, you know, we're getting our first snowstorm today, or I should say sometime this afternoon. It's been raining all day, and it's supposed to switch over to freezing rain and sleet, go into snow, and then go back to sleet and back to rain, all between today and tomorrow. So, welcome to Maine, right? It's kind of like living in England. The weather doesn't know what it wants. But my point is this. I was sitting here just looking out the window and just contemplating and doing research for my third essay, which I've gotten over 1,400 words written down already for my next essay, which is a crossover type thing into various different things. Because I wanted to set that stage. And it occurred to me, people fear death. Not just, this is why they seek out a god or gods. You know, you think of the ancient Egyptian Lord of the Dead, the jackal-headed human figure, God himself, Anubis, stands on a platform with a portal behind him to take that soul who has been waiting in line to either the heavens or that of the hells. You got Hades in Greek mythology, whose job is to judge the dead, to send them to the Elysian fields or to send them to hell for eternal damnation. In Norse mythology, you have Hel, Hel, Helios, goddess of the dead, the land and the name, the deity, much like Abaddon, if you think about it. Sheol is a place. It is a place of eternal damnation. It's a dead place. It's a dead region in Hebrew. So Abaddon is not just a place, but he's also the angel of destruction, the angel of death. Azrael, obviously, the same as Samael. Okay, Samael, the venom, the poisoner of the well. But Azrael is the angel of death. He is the angel of death. He is death incarnate. But when we get to death, I want to take you into India. If you are a garbage man or woman, if you deal with corpses, you know, the cadavers, you're considered tainted. You're considered evil. You're considered to be dead. You go into your own lives. You look at any individual in your life, a mother, father, sister, brother. You look at that spouse, that boyfriend, that girlfriend, that friend who has perished. People are so afraid of death that they don't even feel comfortable doing CPR on someone. Most will not do this. They will save it for the first responders, such as the police or the ambulance crews, the firefighters, to do CPR on. Because there's nothing you can do. The person's dying. I mean, what are you supposed to do, right? Well, from that point, let's just take a look at the journey of that cadaver. Let's take a journey right here, right now. I want you to see why thanatology and necrology plays a huge part in necromancy. The art of understanding death, becoming one with death, association with death. Why so few people get into this field. The first responder shows up. They bring in the defibrillator, they bring in the backboard, the straps. And you can literally pick up a 6-foot guy with one hand because, he's so thin. He's so light. He's like light as a feather. Especially if he's been dying for 4 hours. Okay? Everything's shutting down in stages. Everything's shutting down. The lungs, the respiratory system, the digestive system, the brain is shutting down, losing its mentality. So as the body's shutting down, these first responders show up. They start doing compressions. They check for a pulse. They hit you with the defibrillator several times. And then they put you on the backboard, strap you down, pick you up, take you out to the ambulance, where they sit there for a few minutes, probably about 10, 15 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes even, just working on you, just trying to bring you back, finding some form of life, pumping drugs into you before they head to the hospital. Lights are off, you're already gone. You go in, first place you get put on a cold slab. You get a toe tag with your name. You may even get operated on to find out the cause of death. Was it natural or was it not natural? You get pumped full of chemicals to preserve the cadaver while you're being worked on. Guy sitting there with a bone saw to split your chest open. Or perhaps your skull so he can get to the brain. He or she can get to the brain. And once that's done, you get put back together. You get put back together. The reversal factor. And then you get put in a drawer until the coroner takes you to the funeral home. Now, at this point, the doctor signs your death certificate, time of death. This is where necrology comes in, because at this point is the notification process, writing the eulogy. They're writing. You got to write up the notification of obituary for the newspapers, for the community, for the family members. You got to notify all the family and friends of this individual's passing. And then on the date of the funeral, all of you get dressed up in your monkey suits. Suits, ties, dresses, the black veils, the veil of death, black, the void. You pile into your cars and you go to the funeral home. The first two rows in the center, or to the left, when you're facing the coffin. Just to the right is, or right there in the center, is where they'll place all the family, the immediate family. And everyone else kind of just spreads out through the back of the communion, the sanctuary. But between that time and the time for this, people don't see what the funeral home does to the cadaver. The special chemicals that they pump into the skin to make the skin warm to the touch. The makeup that they put on the cadaver to make them appear to be alive, or just basically in a state of slumber. They do the nails, the put on the clothes, the final clothing before they're put into the casket. But a lot of times when you go in, you don't see all this stuff that is done to the cadaver, to the glick, depending if it's Russian or German translation. The corpse itself. And you go in, and you sit down. You got to minister. You're welcomed. You go in, you sit down. You have all these people just talking, and they're not interested in the wake. They're not interested in the dead person. They're just there to socialize. But the family is grieving. They're grieving the loss of their loved one, their friend, their father, their mother, their brother, their sister, their own child. And you go in, the minister gets up and starts the preaching, starts telling you why you're there, starts talking to you about this individual, how they lived, what they did for a profession. People just listen intently. You see, at this stage, thanatology is more about the art of dying, not just the ill or the dying, but helping the community and the family work through the process of the death and the dying of their loved ones. And then there comes that point when the floor is opened up for anybody who wants to speak, who wants to say a few words about that individual. And after all this is said and done, those of you who are going to the cemetery, that's right, the cemetery. See, you don't know what goes on in the background. While you've been at the wake, even 2-3 days prior, they've already dug the hole. Depending if the cadaver has been cremated or put in a coffin. The hole is already dug. It's prepared. The green netting's down around it over the dirt pile. The metal bars are set there in place for it to be lowered into the ground respectably. The grave diggers have done their job. And if it's done two, maybe 3 days prior, they'll have a cardboard, like a not a 2x4, but one of those big planks, just laying over the hole. Maybe one or two of them at a time on any given grave. Those of you who take the time to walk the cemeteries at night or during the day, you'll notice this. You'll notice these planks, these boards, just lying over a grave. If you lift it up, it's at an incline. It's really in an incline. It's kind of interesting to see how that happens. It's not straight down as you'd see, like you're made to see, like they're being lowered into the ground by these cranks, these mechanical devices that they put the casket on. Nah, it's at an incline. But you don't know that because you're dealing with all this other stuff. So you pile into your cars and you're following the hearse. And it's almost like a convoy, if you think about a military convoy. So you're going street to street, road to road, even sometimes, depending on where the cemetery is, you're hitting the interstate. You'll have people blocking off roads so pedestrians cannot associate or cut you off. At this point, even the stoplights become irrelevant because, by all means, you don't want to leave somebody behind in that convoy. No, it's all or nothing. And when you get there, you all pile out of your car. And your cars, your vehicles, and you follow them. You know, you'll have like 6 to 8 people carrying the coffin. And they're following the minister right up to the grave. And they'll walk on either side and they'll just set it down. They'll set it down on that device. And then the minister will speak some more. Probably some prayers. Probably some form of eulogy. A lot of times it's a Christian minister, you know, a JCI. So you're going to get scriptures from the Bible that deals with death. And it's interesting to see because if you're in the military and you've been in the, you know, you served in some form of capacity and you've had an honorable discharge, you get what is known as the 21 gun salute. You'll have the flag bearers, and you'll have probably about 7 individuals with a pellet gun. A pellet gun, not a real rifle. No, that would be too dangerous. And they'll do what is known as a 21 gun salute. They'll do the salute, the whole kit and caboodle. But those of you who did not have that honor, no, you don't get that stuff. No, you just get all your friends, families, enemies that show up to your grave. That's all you get. And those who are bold enough, when you're at the funeral home, will go up and actually touch the cadaver, the corpse. Just like those few bold individuals will pick up dirt and sprinkle it onto the coffin when it's been lowered down in. And then as you walk away, the grave diggers begin their duty. They lower it down in, they start removing all those metal pipes and everything, all the gears, all that stuff, and they begin to cover the coffin. But it's okay because you're not there to see that. You're not there to see that. No. Now you make the trip, the convoy, all the way back to the funeral home where you sit there and wine and dine. You wine and dine yourselves. You gorge yourselves on pastries, sweets, probably fruit punch or wine, non-alcoholic wines. Or you'll go to, say, somebody's house and you'll do the same exact thing. It's called a gathering. It's called a wake. And here, the after effect, this is where you laugh and you socialize and you have, the good times roll, as they say. And then you depart and you go home. You go back to your daily lives because this is the act of saying goodbye. It is the act of remembrance. It is the act of dying. And that's the interesting thing about thanatology and necrologies, because you don't see all the details of death. You don't associate with the art of dying. Those of you who have had to do CPR are most likely the last individual to see that last spark of life dissipate from somebody's eyes. And that's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. It's going to haunt you for a long fucking time. Trust me, I know. I've had to do it. But here's the kicker. All these procedures, all these methods, I want you to look at the world. Remember how I mentioned that you're considered diseased? You're considered to be dead, contaminated? Welcome to India. Especially if you have to be a trash truck driver. Your career is sanitation. Your career is having something to do with death, such as the gravedigger, the mortician, the minister. All of these titles are associated with death, dying. And you're considered death already. So people are going to avoid you. They're going to leave you alone. And they're not going to bother you. Why? Because they fear death. Here in the US, we have all kinds of legal laws to protect a corpse, the integrity of a corpse, a cadaver. And yet the medical profession can legally, if donated, can put your loved one in a vat of acid and remove all the fats, all the tissues, all the tendons, and you'll have nothing left but a bleach white skeleton for scientific means. But yet you, as the individual, cannot own skulls, bones worldwide. But yet, with all these legal laws protecting the corpse, the dead, cannibalism is still legal. Ironic. Ironic, isn't it? So you see the procedures of death. But yet, let's go into the art of dying. Tibetan. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or what is known today as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's actually known as the Dral Bardo, the Book of the Dead. It shows the soul or the consciousness of the individuals descent, going from the living to the dead. The living to the dead. What is that process? What is that process of dying? What happens to the soul that gets thrown out or cast out of the cadaver? In a lot of materials, it is said that the soul is ripped out. It is cast out, expelled, almost like water from a hose, just out into the cosmos. But in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, though, it shows the journey of the soul going from reality to spiritual. The journey is just beginning. Here we see where the spirits become the gods, they become the elders. Death, death follows life, and life follows death. For one to die, another has to live. For one to live, another has to die. Day follows night, and night follows day. But yet, let's take this for a second and go into Egyptian. Let's take a look at the Old Kingdom of Egypt, perhaps the early dynastic period of Egyptian mythology. We know that Anubis is the god of the dead. He's known as the embalmer. He's known as the protector of the grave. He is known as the protector of the graveyard. He watches over them, much like a hellhound would do. A hellhound protects the magical community. The hellhound protects the underworld, much like Cerberus, the three-headed Greek dog. But yet, you'll find him most likely at a haunting location, like a cemetery, an abandoned church, or an act of mass murder. But here, even though in the early dynastic period, we see a priesthood that protects the integrity of the corpse. I mean, just seeing how they take great care of creating the mummified remains of a loved one. I mean, just think about this process for a second. The Shem priesthood, very highly respected. This is SEM, by the way. Very highly respected. Unlike today's medical procedures where they crack open the chest to get to all your goody goodies. No, these priests were so good, going all the way back to the Old Kingdom and before. They make a little slit in your side, and they have these four containers, and they remove your organs, the ones that they believed you would need on your journey to the afterworld. And if you're following the Egyptian Book of the Dead, could come back because you would need those organs. So they were handled very precisely. They were handled with great care, great cautionary, how they were removed and put in to these jars. And then they would have this hook, almost like a steak knife, but longer, like a fishing rod. One of those harpoons type images. And they would shove it up your nose and puncture your brain, because the brain wasn't considered one of them. It was not considered one of your greatest attributes. So they would puncture the brain, and they swirled it around, and they were able to pull the brain right out through your nostrils at that point. But then they would wash down the body. They would carefully wipe down, clean up the body, and then they would wrap you. They would begin mummifying you, wrapping you in these bandages from the toes all the way up, doing the head last. And then they would pick you up, put you in a sarcophagus, and you would be in one of these temples for all eternity. Look at King Tut, prime example right there. But what's ironic is that, like all these other names, today people don't shun these. The mortician. They don't shun the gravediggers today in most parts of the world. In fact, it's considered to be an honorable position. Unless you're living in India, then you're basically screwed. But my point is this: these priests, these Shem priests, were highly respected because of their utterance of the spells, their precise utterance of the spells that they cast when they were doing the mummification and the preparation of the body for mummification. In some cases, even they were even chased out of town. They were chased down the streets. They were considered vile at that point. So they just ran. They were chased after, chased out of Dodge. And it's ironic that people today still feel this need to shun anything to do with death, even though death is all around you. How we care for our dead, how we approach death as individuals or a herd collective, more so. We see all the legal laws that are now in place. And those in the medical field are the only ones that are allowed to have anything to do with the dead. You have to have some kind of medical training, much like these ancient priests. I mean, look at the cult of Anubis, for an example, or the cult of Artemis. In some cases, she's seen as the mother. Other cases, she's seen as the virgin. Would this not be classified as the Book of the Dead, or the Tibetan Book of the Dead, I should say? Life and death, the beginning of the end. All things are made new. Interesting, isn't it? But I don't expect you to believe what I just said to you. In fact, I want you to go out and study it yourself. I want you to look the materials up. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Fedal, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Shem priests. That's SEM, by the way. Yet again, SEM. Look at the different structures and different duties of the priesthood. Very, very magnificent. Very fascinating. And then I want you to look worldwide. Look at the different regions, how people approach death. Become observant. I sometimes go to funerals just to sit there as a minister, as a friend, and I would sit there, just watch and observe people, watch their reactions, how they approach the loss and the death of someone. But thanatology, and even though it's been around since the early 19th century and picked up and considered part of the medical community since the 1970s, and that of necrology, the biography of death, the notification process. All of this stuff goes hand in hand with death. And I want you to pay attention to that because what do you think is going to happen to you? Think about that for just a second. One day, I'm going to go through this process. So are you. So, what is the art of dying? I think the Tibetan Book of the Dead says it best, but and really paints that colorful picture of understanding the living and the dead. Most importantly, the art of dying, the process of dying. Have you ever gone into your sanctuary, your inner sanctuary, your altar room, and you just sit there in pitch black during the void meditation, and just envision what is it going to be like? What is it going to be like for you to die? What is it going to, how's it going to happen? What's going to shut down first? What's going to happen when you die? Are you going to be like the Christians and believe that your soul is going to stay in your cadaver for all eternity until the end of days? Or are you going to be like the pagans and Wiccans and believe that your spirit will join your ancestors? The spiritual world, the middle world, or maybe the Voodoo system, which is an African Caribbean tradition as well. Okay, Haitian Voodoo or African Voodoo. The Loa, voodoo means ancestral. You're advised by your ancestors. And it's something that's very interesting and intriguing to see from a religious perspective, not just from a physical perspective. How will you evolve? What will happen to you? Where will you go? This is spiritualism right here. I want to tap into your spiritualism. I want you to think about what's going to happen. How's it going to happen? And where will you end up? Where will your final resting place be? Where will your soul, your ka, your katra reside? Heaven, hell, spiritual nexus, maybe with your ancestors. Who knows? But hey, you get to envision what it's like. You get to prepare yourself for that day, that inevitable day. Have a good day.